This is topic 1 of CHET Unit 1, and it's about what is creative thinking. In this subunit, you will learn about what is creativity, what is creative thinking, what are the phases of the creative process, and what are challenges of the creative process. Let's start with creativity. We know that creativity is an important skill. We can read this all over the business blogs. We can see it in presentations that are made at the conference. The World Economic Forum has announced it already in 2016 that creativity will have moved from the 10th place in 2015 to one of the top 3 skills in 2020. And we now have 2020, right? And we also know that creativity is particularly important for engineers, as you can see here, for example, where the engineering.com blog in 2018 selected 4 cornerstone skills for engineers which they need for the future of work. And you see here creativity is on the 3rd place. Now, why is creativity an important skill? The issue is that most of the activities that engineers do or will do in the future can be replaced. So everything that is a routine task is highly susceptible by being replaced by automation. If it's technically feasible, it will be replaced. On the other hand, we have management tasks, which are the least susceptible to be replaced. And amongst those, we have creative tasks. So creative tasks are becoming increasingly important in engineering job profiles because those are the tasks that cannot be replaced. Creativity has been defined by Theresa Amabile in 1998 as the production of novel and useful ideas by an individual or small groups of individuals working together. Now we see here that creativity is a function of something being novel and useful. Novelty, if we just look at novelty, then we see that novelty is a function of how different something is from prior work, so from what we already know and what is already there, and then also how surprising it is compared to what the audience experienced. That means that if you have different audiences, something might be surprising to one but not to another audience. And that then makes it difficult to figure out whether something is novel or not. But still, novelty is relatively easy, right? So you have to find out, is it something new compared to what is already there, and is it surprising? Usefulness is much more difficult because usefulness is even more in the eye of the beholder. So if it's summer and you're getting very warm on your feet, then a summer pedal like this might be of use, of course. But otherwise in winter, it's really context dependent, right? If your kids have grown up and you will not need their swim wings anymore for them to swim, if it's your taste, you might create a lamp out of it. This here is something I feel is very useful, a stop brush, because I'm always slamming doors and I'm ruining doors, and I've never thought before about that I can use old brushes for purposes like this. So this is something I would actually think is useful. Or what do you think about a carnival fork? Imagine you're going to carnival and you don't have anything to dress into. Then you would probably be happy to have this fork, right? And to be able to transform it into something that you can wear as a carnival dress. So, but here on these examples, you already see that things can be useful if you have a context for them, or they can't be useful. And that's a bit difficult with creativity, but bear in mind creativity is the creation of novel and useful ideas, and both needs to come together so that you have creativity. Now, if you look at this example, that kind of very well explains what we mean by novel and useful. If you look at the upper left picture, then you see here a lady who's kind of saving her shoes from the rain with some small umbrellas. So she has really an issue, right? She wants to be stylish. She wants her shoes not to be wet. She doesn't want to ruin her socks if she's wearing some. I cannot really see this. But anyway, this is something novel. It's not really useful, I would say. On the other hand, rather, they have been inventing something for the same problem. I want to look stylish. I don't want to get wet feet. I don't want to ruin my socks, and it shouldn't be too heavy, in a more intelligent form, in a more useful form. So here you see these stylish red shoes, rain shoes, which you can even fold and which are very, very light, so you can easily also transport them. And that's something which kind of exemplifies the difference between something we would say is creative and something which kind of just came up but is not really useful. Now I give you 3 minutes to reflect, and I ask you, think about what was the last new product you have seen that was both surprising and useful. And then please also think about why was it surprising and what made it useful. The best way would be if you would write the answers to this question down. I give you 3 minutes and then I will be back to you. So, 3 minutes are over. Now let's move to the next topic. Creative thinking. You know, creativity is a skill that actually requires leaving the conventional thinking path. And to demonstrate this, what I would like you to do now is to take a pen and take a piece of paper and then connect the 9 points using 4 straight lines without putting down the pen. And once you've found a solution, think about how to do it with 3 or with 1 straight line. I give you 1 minute to think about it. So 1 minute is over. Did you come up with a solution? Did you come up with a solution for 4 straight lines or 3 or for 1? Actually, the solution for 4 straight lines, it's relatively easy. You go up, you go to the right, and you actually leave the square made by the dots. Then you go down, leave the square again, and you go up again. The issue with creativity is that you don't stay in the space which is given to you. It's the same with 3 straight lines. You really, really have to go out of the space that is given to you. And with 1 straight line, you have to think differently. You just need a big pen. And that's also a solution to this challenge. But if you stay within the square, and if you just think about one line as one small line, then you cannot solve the task. And that's how creativity works. It never stays in the space that you give to it. Now, people have different creative styles, individual creative styles. Curtin found out that there's adapters and there's inventors. The adapters, they produce actually ideas. They produce sufficient ideas, but these ideas are usually close to existing definitions of a problem, and they represent likely solutions. They are good because they help to improve, but they are not disruptive. But do you always need disruptive ideas? So adapters actually contribute to the development of innovation in a way that they deliver organizations with incremental ideas. Innovators, on the other hand, are more likely to not stay in the space which is given to them. They are relatively likely to reconstruct the problem, to challenge the assumptions, and to come up with solutions which one would rather not expect. So they, instead of being concerned with doing things better, help you with doing things very different. And actually, you will need both. If you're interested in how creative you are yourself, then I would recommend you to complete the questionnaire. You will have to be as honest as possible to yourself. On the innovation portal, you just go there. It's 26 simple questions. How creative are you? in the end, you know how creative you are according to this assessment, right? But if the questionnaire says you are not the most creative person, then that doesn't really matter for the creativity process. There is this ongoing debate of whether creativity is something that you can train or whether creativity is something that is an innate ability. And if you look into this debate, then you see that it started a long time ago, and it started with studies which kind of looked into, do inventors actually have specific personal traits? And you can find some personal traits or personality traits in inventors. The first one is that they usually know 2 to 3 fields simultaneously very well. So 2 to 3 knowledge domains, which might mean that they have studied 2 to 3 fields. It might also be that they are working in a completely different professional field. So for example, in engineering, but in their spare time, they are really, really great musicians. That would also mean they pursue 2 to 3 fields, knowledge fields simultaneously. They are curious. They're more interested in problems than in solutions. So they wouldn't easily come up with a solution to stop a discussion. They would rather try to understand a problem really well. And they would question assumptions of earlier work. They are usually generalists, so people who have a lot of knowledge, but not necessarily the very deep knowledge in every area they look at. And they are usually inventive and entrepreneurial. One of the examples is Thomas Alva Edison. You probably all know him. He has invented the phonograph and the electric light bulb. He holds more than 1,000 patents, and he's praised as one of the great inventors. But on the other hand, we must also say he applied the principles of mass production and large teamwork to the process of invention, because he had one of the first research labs with a lot of people who worked for him, actually. So he didn't come up with the inventions himself, and he didn't put them in their final form himself. And that kind of tells us that creativity needs, or at least really, really benefits from groups. There is psychological theories that say to be really creative, you have to make up a group which works like a brain. And there you need people with 3 different roles. The creator, who is very fast in generating new patterns, new ideas, people who come up with new ideas just like this, right? People who always come up with new ideas. Then you need another role, and that's the owner. And these are people who have profound and in-depth knowledge in a specific knowledge domain. They're also able to tell you what other people have already tried, what will probably work, what will probably not work. And then there is the broker, and the broker actually knows who can do what, and he can link people to each other. So he doesn't have in-depth knowledge, neither has he very creative ideas, but he can support the process of creativity and innovation through linking the right person to other right persons, right? And that's very, very important. So if you put the creator and the owner together, then they generate an idea pool, and that's the cortex. If you put the owner and the broker together, they both evaluate ideas. That's the limbic system. And if you put the broker and the creator together, those two, they create excitement. And that's called an upwelling reticular activating formation. And that's how ideas are moved through the brain. So creative thinking, just to come back to the initial saying, it doesn't matter if not everybody in a group is the super creative person. Creative thinking is more than just out of the box thinking. It's a process that can be consciously set up, and it can be taught, and it can be trained. It's not an innate personal trait. It's a capability. And this is why we can train it. And what we also know is that creative processes benefit largely from group work if they are well facilitated. So you also need the facilitation skills. Right? So now, if we look into phases of creative processes, then we know there is divergent and convergent thinking phases. In divergent thinking phases, one usually tries to create as many ideas as possible to create choices. In convergent phases, one tries to make choices to kind of then limit the number of ideas again. So here you see it again. In divergent thinking, generate as many as possible different ideas in a, if possible, short period of time. In convergent thinking, combine and evaluate ideas so that in the end you don't have 1 million ideas, but some ideas which you would like to pursue further. Here are some examples of convergent and divergent thinking. So typical processes. If you have convergent thinking, then typical processes relate to recognize things that are similar, combine things that belong together, preserve what you already know, play it safe, make associations from fields that are close to what you're discussing, right? And then you will result as an individual with a greater familiarity of what already exists. You will be able to give a correct answer. You have in-depth knowledge, a high level of skill, and a feeling of security and safety. If you go, on the other hand, into divergent thinking, so the first phase of creativity processes, then for creating all these ideas, it's rather about being unconventional, seeing things in a new light, producing multiple answers, shifting perspectives, seeing new possibilities, but also taking risks. It's risky to propose an idea that nobody has thought yet, because the others might say, "Are you crazy?" That's what's happening. So you're taking risks when you're in the divergent phase. And that might result for you as an individual, but also as a group, in multiple solutions, which is good because then you can choose in surprising answers, in new lines of thinking or new ways of doing things, and in exciting possibilities. At the same time, you will probably feel a bit uncertain, right? Now, time to reflect. Imagine you would be given the task to come up with a means to support an old lady with transporting food from the supermarket to her home. Come up with 3 solutions that result from convergent thinking, and come up with 5 solutions that result from divergent thinking. And then justify, how did your thinking differ? I suggest you to write these solutions to this task down. Take 5 minutes to reflect on it. And after these 5 minutes, you open the second part of Unit 1, Topic 1.